And today I'm speaking with Nathan Ormond. Nathan, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Yeah, hi.
And I just want to give a brief bio for Nathan, brief introduction. Nathan runs a YouTube channel called Digital Gnosis, and I'll have the link for that beneath the video if you want to check it out when we're done. He conducts interviews and conversations on topics including religion, philosophy, and science. And is it correct you're a software engineer?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's what I do as a job.
Okay, and I would say that if I had to pick one of your biggest claims to fame, it's that you have a 7-hour-long video discussion on YouTube, which is pretty impressive.
Yeah, that was a long one. Yeah.
Did you do that all in one sitting, by the way?
Yeah. That one was just like I decided one of the things I'll do is like every couple of weeks or something I do like an open hangout. So just it's vaguely moderated in that like I'll try and help the conversations flow, not let anyone hog it, and make sure like if there's people that want to come in, it's flowing in that way. But in general, it's just like an open conversation, and that one happened to go on for 7 hours with people coming in and out. And
that's awesome.
Yeah.
I still have to watch it. It'll take me a while, obviously, to get through it, but I do want to watch them. I've watched a number of your videos, and it's I'm very impressed with both the depth you go to and the realness of it. And I'm just going to talk about that here in a little bit, but. You, just to finish the bio, you like to ride motorbikes. You do mixed martial arts and Brazilian jiu-jitsu, wrestling, weightlifting, and training. Is that all correct?
Yeah, pretty much. Not so much training MMA at the moment, just because I'm kind of getting older and you've got to invest a lot of time and stuff like that. So, I mean, mostly my training now is just for fun when I can. But yeah, it's correct to it. Yeah.
But you can't say you're that old because I think I'm a lot older than you. So if you're old, then I'm really old. But
well, I turned 24 last week. But it's like when people, like if you're trying to balance plates and stuff, like that isn't really a sport where you can do that if you want to compete or anything. It's got to be, like there's no real, especially like if you're doing software and learning maths and stuff, there's not really like I'm just going to give up 3 hours of every evening in the week, eat no food and get like punched in the head, and that'll just fit in fine with my schedule and everything else. Like it's not.
Yeah, I can imagine it's pretty rough when you're really into it. So yeah, I am 20 years older than you, so I am definitely an old man. You like rugby. You have is it a Yorkie? A Yorkie dog?
No, I actually both my dogs died last year. So I had one dog that was a Tibetan. Yeah, one dog was a Tibetan Terrier that I had for how long? I think she was 15, and then the other dog had like a bacterial infection on her gut, and so ended up. It was really bizarre because it was just like in a week, and then she went into the hospital and died, which was really. Unexpected and stuff. So currently no dogs for about 6 months now. Yeah.
Are you all going to get another dog at some point?
V has been wanting to get a cat for a few, and my brother got a cat last week, and she saw it and was really into it and stuff. But yeah, I mean, like the dogs were from more like like when we were younger and kids and stuff, and then so they kind of I guess don't want to get another dog because they're looking at retirement and stuff and don't want the responsibility, I guess.
Yeah, dogs are nice though, especially if you have the right personality for them. We have 4 very small children, and we have a lab shepherd mix, and she's just sweet. The little babies can be right near her and she doesn't get upset or anything, which is good. Going back to your bio, you have a substantial collection of books from what I've seen. You read complex authors like Dostoevsky and Plato, and your pet peeves include when you pronounce specifically as pacifically and nuclear as nuclear.
That's true, yeah.
Any other pet peeves you want to add to that list?
There's probably some, like I genuinely... I think I should get like tested for something because like I have all these like little things where I'll get really frustrated by like and I know this is quite common actually, but like software like different indentation conventions and style conventions. I get really annoyed by like noises and things like that as well. So I think like, oh, these are definitely the symptoms of something. Like, like if I'm trying to read, but maybe that's normal to an extent. I don't know how.
Yeah, I know what you mean about the indentations. I just learned SQL in the last 2 years, and our um, data intelligence team, whatever they're called, the business intelligence team, they would see my SQL, and they like, you could just see them frantically fixing the indentations. Like, that's not how we do it. Like, I'm like, well, would it work? Like, yeah, it'll run just fine, but that's not how we do it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I
So,
picked up something last week at work, and there's this one class that's 2,000 lines long, and like, especially in Java, this is just not good. And like, I've spent, like, I'm trying to fit. There's like one line I've got to change, and I've got to like read through 2,000 lines and like fit right. So this is going to change, and nothing, and there's comments like int temperature, and then there's a comment next to it that says the temperature, and I'm like, oh, like that, it's just like, so, yeah, I get really frustrated about those things. But
yeah, I can see that. It's especially when everyone's doing it the right way, or the standard way, and you see somebody do it a different way. I'm sure it's hard. In your channel, you tackle pretty hard subjects, including just a brief couple examples here: moral anti-realism, non-theistic moral realism, ontological arguments, and contingency arguments. Again, just a sampling. So you could deal with a lot of hard subjects, and you've had several very insightful conversations with a YouTuber called PineCreek Doug. If anyone doesn't know PineCreek, I'll put the link for his channel as well beneath the video. And I just want to end with this, and then I want to ask you to kind of fill in what I don't know. In the summer of 2019, you created a video talking about your belief and commitment to Christ. By the fall of 2019, you appeared to be, from the videos, this is not a conversation, but from your videos, you look like you were in a deconversion process. And by spring of 2020, you posted a video, or at least one, talking about how you were not a fundamentalist Christian anymore. Is that all correct? Fairly correct in the timeline?
Yeah, that's pretty correct. I mean, I think the conversion testimony was a little bit earlier. I think it was May, maybe, or April, May. But yeah, pretty. Yeah,
okay.
Pretty much.
And you're, by the way, where are you in the UK?
So northwest near Manchester.
Okay, gotcha. Very cool. I know a little bit about England, but I don't know that part. But it's is there some kind of phrase where they said there's nothing north of Manchester? Did they say that?
I don't think. I mean, there might be somewhere, right? I don't think I mean, like, there is. Like there are like these kind of cultural divides between the north and the south, like, because the south is quite heavily influenced by London, and there's like a lot of money and stuff, and I guess the stereotypes are that people are posher, and the stereotype is then as you go north, people become more rough and eat like chips with gravy on and stuff like that, and more manual labor, kind of like blue collar, white collar in America, maybe, or something like that. But
are you closer to like the countryside though, like the mountains and the prettier parts?
Yeah. I mean, like, I mean, pretty far away from the coast where I am, but yeah, there's some kind of like hilly regions, not too far away from Wales as well, like an hour's drive. And Wales is full of like quite big mountain ranges in the Brecon Beacons and stuff. Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, before we get into your story, I just wanted to do one quick icebreaker. Could you tell us maybe your top 1 or 2 favorite movies of the last few years?
Like, as in that have come out in the last few years?
No, sorry, just favorites that you would, if you had to list some from, I mean, you could your whole life, your favorite movie in your whole life.
I mean, there's one that I genuinely enjoyed and no one else seems to, which is Cloud Atlas. So that's like a Marmite film, right? Because it's like 8 hours long or something. And I mean, it's probably dead corny. I really like The Matrix, though. I don't know why I like it so much. Especially, like I watched it again recently, having studied philosophy, and there's just so much kind of in there. But like, I must have watched it the first time when I was about like, I don't know, 14 maybe, or something like that. And it just really kind of, I mean, it freaked me out, but it made me like think about a bunch of cool things. And I just always really enjoy that film. So
yeah, I'm excited to see what they do with the fourth one. I'm not sure when it's coming out, but I'm excited to see how they push it forward.
Probably ruin it. The whole.
Yeah, they always do. It's when you mentioned the whole thing of people like really getting into that movie and thinking, making them think. I remember, I think it was when I was in college, the movie The Truman Show came out. Did you ever see that?
Right.
One? And
yeah, I just watched it like 2 weeks ago.
Okay, they were saying like that kind of made them think like, what if life's like that? But
Yeah.
It's cool when you see a movie like that that really makes you think. So just in terms of getting into your story, could you tell us a little bit more about your story, who you are, and then as you tell us the story, tell us how it turns towards religion and all that, and just eventually the deconversion.
So I guess I mean, as you kind of mentioned, I guess the proper place to start is probably talking about me becoming a Christian around 3 years ago now, and I wasn't like raised in Christianity or anything, though. In the UK, there's she can't hear because
Tell her I said hi.
He says hi.
Nice to see you.
So yeah, in the UK, and interestingly, perhaps even more so than America, though I'd say the UK is less religious, the church and state are quite intertwined. So we actually have, like our primary school systems quite heavily influenced by the church. People pray in assemblies and things, singing hymns in assemblies, a lot of Church of England schools and connections that way. And I think we had like 10 school trips to churches and things as well when in primary school. And so I guess I was influenced in that, like just reflecting back, were certainly Christian influences, like those things. And I think my parents had some Catholic friends, and I'd like been interested in going to a Catholic church once or twice or something like that. But certainly I'm adopted as well, and my parents didn't make me go to church. They weren't Christian or anything. I think actually when I was about maybe 9 or 10, and I thought, the architecture is really cool on cathedrals, let's go in them. And I think my dad was kind of like, oh, you don't believe in any of that crap, do you, or whatever. So it was never pushed down that route, but certainly absolutely. Yeah.
Go back to the adoption thing for a second. Were you adopted like as a newborn or later in life?
Yeah, so there's a couple so I was separated at birth, and then I was in foster care for about 10 months, which I guess from like a psychoanalysis point of view would have been enough time for me to like form attachments and have them broken again. So to kind of quite early trauma events, and then I was adopted at that time around 11 months or so in permanently to the family that I grew up with and stuff.
Okay, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, it's all good. So yeah, then I guess I would have described myself as an atheist throughout high school. I was always towards the top of my kind of classes, if not so my kind of identity became intertwined with almost like like the new atheism at the time, where I was kind of excelling in the sciences. I loved watching like Brian Cox documentaries about the cosmos and stuff, and so my theological or metaphysical, my views about religion were just that it was kind of this it was this anti-scientific thing of the past that people didn't need anymore, I guess. And then I think around when I was in sixth form, which is kind of like our bridging period between high school and university. So you start university around 19 years old in the UK. And so sixth form's kind of like that 17 to 19 period. And in my first year, I snapped an ACL in my left knee playing rugby. And so I was like I wasn't really focused on school at that point, and rugby was like the main thing that I was kind of doing, where my identity was and stuff. And then I kind of was like, oh, well, why am I depressed? I guess I'll think about this adoption stuff and I'll find my biological mum for the first time. So I did, but it turned out that the guy who she was with kind of really didn't like me. He ended up kind of snapping the ACL in my other leg doing Muay Thai sparring, which is Thai boxing. So then I kind of had 2 snapped ACLs. Emotionally, I was all over the place because I was like, who am I? Do I even like want to, like I was into, have you heard of like Stefan Molyneux as well? He has like crazy ideas about like defooing. So if you think you've got like toxic relationships in your family, then defoo is like family of origin, and stuff like that was getting in my head. So I was like, well, I've got these problems with my adoptive parents, I'm all confused, so I'm going to kind of like push them away, and I've got these 2 snapped ACLs. So I wasn't like I wasn't that age thinking, oh, I can't wait to go to university and do this with my life. I was more like I want to kill myself. And I actually ended up with those 2 snapped ACLs, drinking like way too much, trying to kind of kill myself, waking up in hospital and all that. And I'd ran away from home for a period of time. And then I guess I just slowly started to piece myself together again. Like I had 1 surgery on one of my legs, rehabbed that, had the second surgery. That was like a 12-month period of time to get all rehabbed of it. Started kind of working my first full-time job in that time period. Going to the gym throughout rehab, which helped me kind of build confidence. But I guess I started to piece together the narrative of like what had happened to me, maybe in theological terms, like trying to find meaning in the suffering, or so it wasn't just arbitrary or something. And then I think in that time is when people then like Jordan Peterson, who were becoming popular, because this is around 2016, started to appeal to what I was experiencing. So people like Jordan Peterson, their message in general is, okay, your life kind of sucks, but how can you take responsibility for it and sort it out? Prima facie, this isn't a bad thing. Like this is like, oh, well, I've got to keep my room clean, maybe set myself some goals for a career, take responsibility. I mean, to an extent, there are things that are out of your control. Maybe he doesn't take them into account enough, but there is a good message to it. The problem is that then there's also these tacitly kind of conservative views which are brought in, anti-communist view. Not to say I'm not a communist, I don't think communism is good, but this kind of very black and white view of politics that can be brought in, and if you're not aware or thinking critically, you'll just kind of adopt that view, and with that, as I'm sure most people are aware, is quite closely tied to kind of religious attitudes as well. So conservatism being like, there's something valuable in tradition or in the past to be preserved. One of those things happens to be religion. And so Jordan Peterson is also looking at stuff like the biblical stories and trying to make them relevant. Now, the way he'd interpret them is very different to the way a Christian would interpret them. Yeah. But that was the thing that turned me on to Christianity, made me start thinking about this. And then before you know it, I started going to like a Bible study at a Calvinist church nearby, various psychological phenomena and biases and things being that I'm kind of accepting, I'm accepting the views of the group in Bible studies. I'm feeling like a little bit pressured to do things like take communion or whatever because of people's expectations of this person who's this young man who's coming in and putting his life together. And so I'm like, oh, well, I've got to kind of pander to that expectation. And then also stuff like YouTube algorithms, right? Filtering, providing me with more and more content that sends me down that route. And before I know it, I'm kind of like a full-blown Christian who's, believes pretty much everything in the Bible is true, almost. Obviously, I was never like a young earth creationist, but, I believed Jesus existed, rose from the dead. I still think Jesus existed, but I'm aware of the nuance there. I thought there was a God you could talk to in prayer, that people who don't believe are going to hell. And then I was like that for approximately a year. And then there's some stuff we could talk about in there, like some very abusive kind of relationships with people around my own age, trying to kind of tell me what to do and how to live, telling me to get married to someone that I was with when it wasn't quite right. And I ended up actually buying a house because they said we were living in sin, and we had to get married, otherwise it would make God very unhappy, and we definitely weren't ready for that. I was like 21. What the hell did I mean, people get married at 21, but definitely we weren't in that right position. And then from there I kind of got into apologetics, I guess because of the cognitive dissonance of the whole thing. I'd frequently find, for example, when I was in the Christian community or whatever, it'd be like it all makes sense. But then when I was in work, there was just something about like the fact that people live life this way, where they have to do like this meaningless work, and their concerns were so different from the concerns described in the Bible. And I was like, this doesn't seem like reality. It doesn't quite match up. Like all this angels and demons and spiritual warfare, and like, people who are a bit tired from the weekend and a bit bored or whatever. It just doesn't. It's not quite the same thing. It doesn't matter.
Now, as you're going through all that, did you?
Yes.
Did you feel like you had support in terms of a couple ways? Did you have anyone really? Not just like random people that were just giving you their input, but just like people that you trusted, family, siblings, anybody that you just felt like you could really open your heart to about some of these things? And along with that, was there anybody that was really trying to either pull you in to Christianity, or anybody trying to really pull you out? Or did you feel like you were kind of relatively free to kind of think through it without anybody's pressure in that context?
So I guess for me in particular, because of the way that I'd kind of alienated my adoptive family, and perhaps, I mean, they're not exclusively terrible people or something, but perhaps as well, not entirely my fault either. You know, like maybe there are mistakes that they've made throughout their life, and so our relationship's a bit broken in certain ways. So they weren't really there for me as those people. And then I think my girlfriend at the time as well was kind of willing to go with whatever. Like when I went back actually a couple of weeks ago and read through some old conversations and stuff in text, and you just think like, wow, like this was really crazy. Like though, you know, like there was no filter. It wasn't really like what you've just said is absolutely insane. It was kind of like talking about godly ways of doing the relationship and stuff like that. And I'm just like, well, but these were like toxic things in our relationship that were getting in the way. So that aspect wasn't really there. From the positive pressure perspective, I guess I've mentioned the expectations of the group and stuff, like the church elders, and a lot of them were very nice, but also a lot of, you know, like for example, like at the end of a Bible study session, they might like pray for their kids, and they say, well, we know the reality of it is that if you know, if they don't find the truth, it's going to be really horrible for them. They're going to go to hell. And like, I just accept stuff like that. And I think now I'd probably be like, you know, do you really believe a loving God? Like, and you worship this God, right? Is that just out of fear? Like, you really believe he's going to burn your kids forever if they don't believe the right thing about Jesus? And I just started to accept these things. So there was that expectational pressure. And then specifically, there was a ministry trainee who came in. And again, I think he was driven to Christianity out of personal issues that he was struggling with. But then one of the manifestations of that psychologically is how he kind of does interpersonal relationships. So I guess he wants to be in control of like minute details and stuff. And then because of some of the things he's feeling, I think he takes that out on people that he has control over. And certainly then, in what was meant to be almost like a therapeutic guidance kind of setting, he was kind of pressuring me to, you know, like we'd have these like 3-hour-long conversations that feel really uncomfortable and want to go home. And I'd still be like sat on his sofa, and he'd be like, you know, I guess I'm just asking, are you ready to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior yet in your heart? And I was like, I don't know, I want to, but I don't. Until, you know, like over time, these just kind of pressured me into even like he'd say sentences like, and you know, he didn't have like a degree in science or anything, but he'd say stuff like, you know, I'm just not sure the evidence is there on evolution. And rather than me going like, oh, why? What do you know that I don't? I'd just be like, yeah, I suppose that's right. Like, you know, and you just start, well, I don't know if you know, but I just kind of started to accept these things through that process. And I guess he was one of the main driving forces as well between like pressuring this relationship towards marriage. Like whenever the church would do something on a weekend, say, I'd be like, oh, it's like church weekend away, can we stay together in this place? And he'd be like, oh, I'm not endorsing you living in sin or whatever, so you'll be apart. Or we do like 4-hour sessions of street evangelism. And I remember he'd ask you to go and put up the gazebo or something, and you'd be like doing your best in the rain, and he'd be like, oh, you're putting it up all wrong. You stand it over there. Or like charismatic Christians had come over and go, oh, I just think it's great what you're doing, glorifying God. And he'd go, oh, what do you believe? And they'd go, well, we're charismatic Christians. And he goes, well, I don't think putting vibrating on the floor above the word of God is a good thing. So like, and I was like, these guys are meant to be on our team. These are Christians. And so I think while his influence brought me in, it also began to reveal some of the cracks between, you know, like good people and what he was saying, which was biblical a lot of the time as well. Like, that's
very divisive attitudes coming out there. Yeah, I've seen some of that as well. It's not the main reason for, you know, either converting or deconverting, but it's a very fascinating dynamic to observe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And so I'm just curious, with your family that you mentioned that you were a little bit estranged from, are you still estranged from them to some extent?
Yeah, I mean, things are a lot better now. You know, like I lived there for about 2 years during that time period, and I guess things have started to heal a bit, and the dynamic's different as well. Like, I mean, they're figuring out how to be parents right throughout the whole thing, and they're figuring out like a new phase of their life, like coming up to retirement as well. I guess the relationship dynamics changed as I'm an adult now as well. But also, I suppose it's difficult because even if you're ready to if you're ready to like have difficult conversations and try and heal things, that they're not necessarily like at that stage, or even at that stage of maturity. As weird as it is, like that's one of the things for me becoming an adult, like realizing that they have their own issues, and I guess maybe they have to deal with a few of those things before we're actually able to deal with some of the adoption stuff and the challenges that we face together. Which
now, I think on one of your videos, I might be misremembering this, but did you get in touch with your real birth mother at some point, and how did that go?
that was actually so when I'd snapped my first ACL in my left knee, I mean I've always kind of experienced depression to a degree, but that was something that was like really like a trigger, because I was just lying in bed for a few weeks and kind of like really like, well, what do I do with my life? I don't really know why I'm in sixth form, or what do I want to do at university, and feel all these so I found my mum and contacted her, and then I mean, I have no idea how much of a representation of like her life and character I really got like a glimpse into, but I guess I think common among adoptees is to build up like a narrative of the birth family and birth story that's almost quite magical, or quite like similarly, I guess you think that they must have their lives together. You don't necessarily like glue any of, or for some people go the complete opposite way and assume that they're going to be complete horrible drug addicts, etc. But I certainly had that, where I hadn't expected her to be a human with issues. And one of those issues, possibly, I mean, I don't know if I know enough about that relationship, but being like this guy that she's with, and he, like I say, ended up kicking in one of my good knee. So I did Muay Thai sparring with one snapped ACL, and I'd never done it before either. That was my first time, and he kicks in my other knee, and then as my knee kind of buckled and I fell over on the floor, a memory I have is of him kind of standing over me and saying, "Not so tough now, big lad," and that was just utterly bizarre. And I remember then, after going to the hospital, she drove me back to like her house, and I remember being sat on the sofa, and as he came home, he came in, kicked in like a metal bin, went upstairs, started playing DMX, like the rap music really loud, and it was just really, really bizarre. Like, so like she'd sit next to me on the sofa, and he'd like come downstairs, and then she'd run over, like, so it wasn't like she was sat next to me, and then it was just kind of messed up. And then I think maybe we will have some sort of relationship going forward. Maybe I'll see her like once every 2 years or something. But since then, it's kind of become clear, almost like she can't actually have a normal adult relationship with me in her life because of the way it makes him behave, and who knows what he's telling her about what seeing me. Like if she's upset or something about it, which I think would be natural. He's probably saying stuff like, well, that's because this adopted kid you've got's all screwed up and he's screwing with your head, or so, like, I don't know. So yeah, that's not a healthy, normal aspect of my life as well, though. That didn't work out. Yeah.
Well, I just wanted to say, just before we go to the next part of this, I'm really sorry for what you've gone through. It's and I appreciate as well and respect your willingness to share it, not just here, but in your previous videos. You've been very open. I'd put some notes down. Just you talked obviously about your injuries, your time in the hospital, how you were at one point suicidal, or at least close to it. a lot of anger. You talked a lot about the cynicism that arose out of some of that background. Poorness, I assume that meant like the monetary poorness, times almost starving, very tired, very broken. You talked about a lot of pain or hurt, even a time when you took some drugs briefly to address some of it. And it as you go through step by step, regardless of the atheism, that I want to get to that, but you've been through stuff that a lot of people, they can't even wrap their minds around. And I mean, like I've got stuff I could say. I went through some really tough times in my life, but there was still like I'm thinking right now of just my, the love of family, siblings, parents that had, a decent sense of like a love base, where you're like, you can always go back and talk to people, they care about you. And it sounds like, from what I've heard, that a lot of that was just never available to you. And that,
well, it's a bit weird, because in a sense, you could say that stuff was there, and it was to a degree, but maybe I would, I couldn't accept it because of how I felt they'd hurt me or something, or perhaps the way in which they show that is something that did hurt me to an extent. If it's like, if you think about, perhaps if you couldn't have your own children, right? And maybe you really wanted to be a mother, it's like the best thing in the world, and then you never kind of felt like it, so you're constantly trying to make up for it by like these kind of unhealthy relationship manifestations and then it's like really difficult then if that sort of thing's happening for you to, even if you are offering like care to your child, it can be kind of like hurting them in a way, especially if they're then going through something trying to figure it out. It's like for them to accept that just hurts them some other way. And so especially when I was all confused around that time, I was just like, this is too much, I need to just like get away from all this, like I'm not ready to deal with that.
It's amazing. I appreciate the insights about how you're trying to go back and understand what was happening behind the scenes with all that, because it sounds painful, honestly, to listen to. It's very real, and I'll say this and move on to the next part, but I feel bad. I feel bad that it wasn't healthy. I can say ditto to some of the, not the same story, but some similar dynamics where just pieces of the puzzle that you would hope would have been there for the sake of the healthiness of things, safety net concept, just the basic sense of well-being, what you need to thrive. Either it wasn't there, or the dynamics in some way messed it up, and that's really hard, especially when you're young. And I will say that for me, I always felt like I had some good people I could go to. I mean, I would disagree with their worldview now, obviously, but I had people I could go to that at that time I trusted deeply with my thoughts, my questions, not questioning religion at that time, but just thoughts and questions about life. And it's so hard to think about not having some of that. And I appreciate your willingness to kind of, I mean, this isn't your main theme of your videos, but like you're kind of behind the scenes saying, I did what I had to do to stay strong and to figure things out. And whether you had support or not, you stuck with it, and you knew it was worth it to be strong for yourself and for the people around you. And I appreciate you taking that journey and being willing to be so open and honest in your videos, because it's very apparent, the kind of heart that you have, and it's apparent that you really do want to learn how to, what life's really about, and it's apparent that you really want to share. Like you've got a lot of good things to share, and you want to help other people who are on similar journeys to say, hey, these are tough questions, let's get through it together. And I appreciate that. So kudos to you.
Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate that. That's a really nice compliment. So yeah.
Yeah, so I appreciate what you're doing. Could you tell me a little bit more about at that phase, where does YouTube come into it, and how did that begin to play a part of your story and your journey?
Yeah. I mean, I guess I'd always kind of been a fan of like Joe Rogan's podcast, for example.
Mhm.
And I'd kind of played around with the idea of doing a podcast, and maybe is it like 2018? I started sitting down with some people and doing some episodes, and so like these were mostly people like I'd started training Brazilian jiu-jitsu at the time, and so like like I did an episode with my coach talking about like business and how he set up the place. I did some episodes with some of the people who had met through there, so like various MMA fighters and another person who was adopted and did like Wim Hof breathing, and like I wouldn't necessarily agree with everything she thinks about the world, but it's like I just wanted to have these interesting conversations, and that's something that I really enjoyed. I guess then I kind of stopped. Like I did a few of those episodes, and then I kind of stopped as I was coming into Christianity then. And then I started making videos again in order to do like apologetics, which was what I thought, oh, well, I want to use YouTube and like, what, like all these kind of sermons on spiritual gifts or whatever, and what, like using what you've got to, and I sincerely didn't want people to go to hell basically. So I was like, oh, maybe, I could piece like the life story that I've got together with some of these ideas I've got and stuff, and I'd be able to help kind of show the truth of God and convert people. And that was originally what I thought I'd be doing on YouTube. Yeah.
And you also went onto some Christian YouTube channels as like a participant in their discussions. Is that correct? And did you find that helpful?
Well, I mean, as I reflect back now, I genuinely think a lot of apologetics is actually for people who are possibly already on the way out.
Yeah,
I do genuinely think that, but I don't have any evidence for it. But
no, it makes sense. They're trying. They see the cracks. They're trying desperately to keep their fingers in the dam before it breaks open. And yeah,
I think it's like. I mean, I think your ordinary believer, so to speak, is just happy going to church, right? They're happy just with the answers that they've got. They don't really have these difficult questions, and if they do, they're happy to just leave it at like God knows, or it's all in God's control, or something like that. Whereas I think whenever one of these it's like you've got a coherent web of beliefs, and whenever one of these like questions actually like gets a hook in there, like and from the Christian perspective, this is kind of like Satan trying to tempt you or whatever. Like I was just watching a live stream with some Christians where they were talking about these doubts and stuff, and how whenever you start having them, you've got to catch yourself and stop yourself, and because it's Satan and spiritual warfare. But I think whenever one of these does catch, it's like you've got to deal with it somehow, and the way that's dealt with is apologetics. And apologetics is essentially reasoning from conclusions, and there's all sorts of psychological, rhetorical, and cognitive tools going on and being deployed in this thing, which is sort of trying to make you feel confident that it's true, make you not feel silly for believing it, making you feel like those who are on the other team are evil and the bad guy, because then that's something to like polarize again. There's all sorts that it kind of does. And I was definitely in it for those reasons, because I wanted it to make Christianity make sense to me, or make me be more certain and confident when I guess I wasn't sure in certain ways. Or
could I ask about one in particular? There is a lady that I've seen you go on her channel a bunch, and I gotta say, SJ, is it Thomason?
Yeah, that's right.
From where I'm standing, she's out there. She's fringe, and I'm just watching one recently where it was like, let's talk about how there's so much evidence for the resurrection, and there's so not, and it's like. I find it hard to honestly just watch it. I'm like, this is. Yeah. I honestly have to stop sometimes because I get so annoyed at what she's saying, because it's like it's so deceptive. But like, when you were in it, did you find conversations like that inspiring and helpful, or was it more frustrating because you were seeing the cracks too?
I mean, there were some things that were definitely frustrating. So, for example, like. when I was in Calvinism and I started to realize it was kind of evil, like I was like trying to find a theology that was against that. So
Okay.
I guess like when we do this evangelism and stuff, and someone would be like, oh, let's pray that souls will come to God. And I was like, yeah, but if God already knows, why are we praying? Like, if we can't like, I was kind of like trying to show the inconsistencies in how they were thinking. Or whenever we'd read the Bible, I just kept hearing like the words like, you will choose or choose. And I was like, well, isn't God like a deceiver then? If he's saying we choose and we don't choose, he's chosen for us. And it would frustrate me when and I guess I didn't see this across the board in the same way I'd see certain answers as inadequate now. But when I felt like inadequate answers were being given that weren't just inadequate, but were like morally evil to certain questions, that was very difficult and frustrating. Even on I'm no expert on the history stuff now, but it was never like the historical questions about Jesus or even like the Old Testament, whether certain events happened or whatever, that really got me, or when people gave answers about them, like that was almost neither here nor there. It was more like the how do we live now stuff, like how do we treat people around us, how do we like do church, and is how we do church like manipulative to people in the congregation who aren't switched on, or and I'd see apologetics coming through that were like just rationalization of like harming people. And then I was like, and there's nowhere in the Bible that I can go to say like this is harmful, because actually like it was all in accordance with the Bible. If you disagree, you're one of them. You never were truly with us, like it says in 1 John or wherever. Yeah.
So you weren't actually a Christian for a huge amount of time, is that right?
Sorry, what's that? I was a Christian or wasn't a Christian?
No, you were a Christian, but you weren't for a huge amount of time compared to most people, is that right?
No, it was probably the core experience, right, was probably like a year. Okay. Like a year of solidly being a Christian, and then maybe a year before that of coming in, and like 6 months after that of coming out. And I'm probably still in that coming out because like I'm still not 100% comfortable with like the label atheist.
Sure.
And it's not that I have something against atheists, but it's like I'm trying to I don't want it to seem like I'm just choosing a camp or something to be with, and I'm kind of happy with like agnostic and stuff right now. But I can, like, as I observe myself, like I can see myself sometimes like being like, well, I really want Christianity to be true. Can I make like a weird liberal version of it make sense? But I'm also aware that like I'm doing that because I want it to be true, not because like the facts are conclusively on that side or something. But yeah, like I'm still in that process of kind of coming out.
Would you say you're still on the fence in any way about whether or not it might be actually true?
I mean, like when it comes to the question of whether a God exists, right, in like the broadest sense, I just don't know. Like,
sure.
I think there would be good reasons to think that the type of God that is like a loving father, for example, or interacts through prayer and signs and stuff in the way that perhaps the Bible describes. Maybe that's not right. I could see how it could still be possible for that to be like a God that interacts with humanity in some way, and religions are like various attempts of people to make sense of this in some way, perhaps. Yeah. But yeah, I think like the strongest reasons to believe in a God would be like almost not leading to like or not very descriptive of that God, or not, like arguments like the contingency argument, which may not even be, it might not be like a deity, it might just be that there is some necessary thing in the universe that or something like that. And almost like the arguments that would describe this kind of deity of classical theism, which it would just seem more like anthropomorphizations that people have made, which I think psychology would describe as like our reasoning biases when, like we feel sad when the weather's a certain way or something. And so we start to kind of associate all these things and think, well, the deity is causing the sad mood and the sad weather because it's unhappy with what, and like things like that. So sort of on the fence in that, like, I don't think I'll ever be able to certainly say I don't know, but I mean, I'm pretty sure that the Christian God or the Muslim God or whatever doesn't exist.
Agreed 100%. Cool. Well, I do want to come back to some of where you're at now, but I wanted to going on with your
Yeah.
storyline, I would love to hear. I know a little bit about this, but I'd love to hear how PineCreek came into the equation. And for anyone who doesn't know who we're talking about, there's a YouTube channel again called PineCreek Doug. I mean, it may just be PineCreek on the YouTube channel, but he goes by the full name PineCreek Doug, and he has a whole bunch of videos, lots of videos at this point, where he talks sometimes to people directly, just asking them about where they're at with different subjects. A lot of them focus on apologetics, and a lot of his videos are just him with a little video of some other, apologetics teacher going through their spiel, and he'll just let them play for a minute, and then he'll make comments, and they're very, very insightful. He does a lot with epistemology, and he does also dive from time to time into things like mythicism. I'll have Dennis McDonald or Dr. Bob Robert Price on, and so he'll dive some into that. But he does a lot of in many different ways. He's basically saying, how do you know that that's true, and have you really thought through all the sides of this and the implications, and do you really have all the information? And it's a great version of epistemology for anyone who hasn't been exposed to it, so I highly recommend it. But you weren't just a watcher, you had an actual interaction there. Can you tell us about what happened there?
Yeah, so about 2 months before that, Trinity Radio, Braxton Hunter, who is a Christian, had released a video called The 7 Types of Atheism or something like that. And I was firmly Christian at the time. And within that, one of the types he called the psychologizer. And this was the first time I came across Doug, was he was saying, what they'll try and do is psychoanalyze, even though they've got no background in psychology, they're trying to psychoanalyze. And you'll actually see the first time in that conversation with Doug, if anyone watches it, where I kind of come in and I say, "Oh, I hear you're into psychology a bit. Is that true?" or something like that. And that was my first exposure to PineCreek. Then I guess somehow when one of his live streams kind of made it into my recommended videos, and so I clicked on it while it was streaming, and I was in the chat, kind of giving all these apologetics arguments, debating around 7 people at once about, you just don't understand Christianity, you don't understand theology, so then at this point, when Doug ends one of those videos where he's reviewing someone else, he says, there's a Christian in the chat, do you want to come in? And so I was like, oh, okay, Jesus has obviously put me here to into the lion's den to talk in front of all these atheists and lead them to God. This is legitimately kind of like a thought that's going on in my.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I jump in to the conversation, and other people who watch it, even Christians who watch it, say, I didn't do all too badly or anything, but I think just the way he was phrasing his questions were things. Almost the considerations were things that I'd been made aware of. Like in the street evangelism, people would say things like, there are so many religions, how can you be sure that the one you've got is right? And, I wouldn't have a problem with that, because I'd be like, well, just because 2 people are making like mutually exclusive claims doesn't entail that neither of them are true. It just means they can't both be true, and I happen to have the right one. But the way that Doug was kind of phrasing these questions was, well, why is it that, say, all these different religious people can agree on something like, I think he phrased it like this pen that I've got here, right? If I let go of it, it's going to drop. And the Hindu, the Muslim, the Mormon, they can all agree on the rate at which that is going to drop, but they all disagree on this God question. Like, how can we tell the difference between these claims? And questions like that, I don't know why it got me thinking a bit more. Maybe it was as well, like one of the questions he asked was something like, I'm drowning right now, and you've got a minute before I drown. Why would you tell me to be a Christian? I know now from his point of view, he's basically trying to reduce it down to carrots and sticks, heaven and hell. But that pressure thinking was like, I wasn't what's the word, in like an articulated way, thinking I don't actually have good reasons. But I guess like the process of doing that like searching through my thoughts and because like you jump back to these obscure like like the contingency argument, and then we're going to put in a Christological argument or something after that, and and then it'll all lead to Jesus, and it's like I don't know, is that the way, like if you think about Christianity being true, there's all these kind of dramatic stories about, someone on the Titanic and the priest let the women and kids go first and that makes them become Christians or whatever. And you think, okay, so that's like the type of situation in which God would be acting through people in my internal worldview. And I can't actually think of what I'd say to Doug. I'm just like, it'd be, Jesus loves you, like but none of this is to do with truth. None of this actually tells him, and if he's genuinely just not bothered about those things, which I'm not sure he is, he's quite stoic, then do I really have reasons for him to think this is true? And I don't know what it is about the way, but his questions are just very well formed, and they force you to just pause and internally critique. It's that comparison against your claims against the Mormons' claims. The Mormon, I'd be like I just read Alvin Plantinga, who's a well-regarded Christian philosopher, and he's talks about something called Reformed epistemology. I've not actually thought about this in a while, but I'd just been studying Reformed epistemology at the time. And basically what I see that as now is essentially a way for Christians to say, I'm rational in believing God exists, and I don't need to be able to explain to you why. And if you've got a problem with that, you can take that up with Alvin Plantinga or some other philosopher who's got all the answers. It's basically saying that he uses the word de jure objection, which is the how you come to believe objection, and the de facto objection, the true state of affairs. And Plantinga is arguing the Christian has these faculties in which there's a sensus divinitatis, which senses the truth. And so if you believe in Christianity, if Christianity is true and you believe in Christianity, you've got this faculty. So it doesn't matter whether or not you know about that or whether or not you know the reasons. If God's caused you to believe, then it's true. The real question is actually whether or not God exists. And that question is one for the philosophers to have and to fall back on and stuff. I know
it's
some people...
scary when you think about that, but the way he's doing that, yeah.
I know, like that's a really brief excursus of what it is. There's kind of a bit more to it, but so I was thinking, well, I'll use this philosophy, right? I'll just go, well, I've got the Holy Spirit telling me that it's true, and so I don't need anything else. But this was rhetorical, right? This was just because this is what I'm being told what to say by apologists and philosophers. But the reality is that when Doug asks a question, well, the Mormon says the exact same thing, right? The Muslim says the exact same thing. They see a green light when they pray. So how can we tell the difference? I don't have an answer for that. I could say, well, this is just a de jure objection, and I've said a fancy Latin-sounding word that I don't really understand, but it's just. I'm aware at some level this is disingenuous, like, because I don't have an answer to that question. And then I'm like, what, that system 2 thinking kicks in, and I'm watching myself and I'm going, you're being disingenuous, Nathan. You're not answering his question honestly. You're falling back on tactics so you can come off well in the conversation, or you can, and these things just planted doubts in me. And I guess after that conversation, I kind of binged PineCreek videos for about a week, and I actually felt physically sick as well. Yeah, but I felt physically sick. Like I was like, oh no, what I think I might have come to believe a lie here. Like, and I really struggled with this idea that it was spiritual warfare. I really struggled with this idea that because Doug says, I'm under the power of Satan or whatever. But I really struggled with he is like that, or he, like he really doesn't like me and he's out to get me, and seeing him as the enemy. And like I know
he jokes about that. He jokes about it. Did you actually think he was like somewhat serious when he says that?
Well, I didn't think he would. I thought he himself wasn't serious, but didn't know that he actually was, and so
Satan was actually using him, even though he was making fun of it. Yeah,
right. And so I was kind of like wary, like in my mind, thinking there's spiritual warfare going on. I'm like, Satan, I know you're there. I'm gonna which is kind of psycho, whatever. Now, but,
could I ask, when you say you were in it for a year, I missed the highlight point. Like, when did you, what got you to first bow your knee and repent and say, I confess you are Lord and Savior. I am a sinner and I fall short of the glory of God, and I need my sins covered by the only perfect sacrifice, who is Jesus. And I do place my faith in his death and resurrection on my behalf. Just the pure gospel message. Was it like a sermon that someone preached, or a book you read, or is it just something you were aware of and you finally, said, yes, I will agree with God. This is real. Like, how did you actually come to go? Because you said you were an atheist before, of sorts. How did you go from that to a Christian? And then just maybe a follow-up question: did you feel different? Like, did you feel at peace, or some kind of sense of like, I finally got it. I figured out life. It's about Jesus Christ.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the first part, I certainly felt inadequate, and I was being influenced by the Christian narrative, but in the form of the stuff Jordan Peterson was saying, or like Dostoevsky's Crime and Punishment, which is really heavy on that kind of the idea that we're fallen, sinful kind of beings, especially in the main character Raskolnikov. And I guess I began to identify with that character quite a lot, and then I'd think, oh, well, maybe it could be the case, right, that God has like shown me this story because it resonates with something that's going on with me. And then within Christianity, there was like an introductory few weeks of sessions called Christianity Explored. It's more a UK thing, so I don't know if it's in America or anything, but they really kind of, they really lay it on you emotionally in those videos. So it's sort of like, like they'll be talking about, and I think there's like a lot of psychological like anchoring techniques and stuff like that going on. So it'll be like, if you think back to all the things that you've done in life, we're not good people. And like the imagery will be like a broken, like there'll be a broken down house. There'll be creepy music in the background. There'll be like a heartbeat, like boom, 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 boom. And it will be like, now, if you imagine if everything you'd ever done was laid out on the walls before God, he wouldn't think we're very good people. Like it's clearly trying to like, if there's anything you've ever done that you're kind of guilty of, which is like, and Christians are nodding their head right now. Yeah, it is everyone. All sinners, all fall short.
That brings back some memories that I cringe because it's hard to hear it, but it's not foreign to me. I know exactly what that's like, especially when you mix that with the whole rapture stuff. Like, you're bad and God's coming soon, so you better get ready before it's too late. And that kind of horrible, it's basically a version of shame culture. Like, you need to be deeply ashamed of yourself. Yeah. Anyway, go on.
No, it's good. I think, you start to develop this, these kind of triggers of words and things like this psychologically that make you feel guilt and shame. And I actually remember in that time period as well, like I'd wake up in the middle of the night, like cold sweats and stuff, and I'd been having like nightmares about like Satan attacking me and stuff, and really weird. Like I now think that that's just because I was being exposed to all this sort of mad manipulative kind of rhetoric, and it was like harming me psychologically. But that stuff made me in the private space of home and stuff be like, God protect me, like start praying and stuff like that. And then having these one-to-ones with this ministry trainee around the same time, he was the one who really started layering in, because he was quite a big fan of John Piper, that quite what would you say, that evangelical way of saying, like, do you accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, and accept that you're a sinner? Like, I think he would kind of, and at the time I wasn't aware of it, but he would say almost those exact sentences and prime me. And I remember like 1 week, for example, he said that to me, and I was kind of like, no, I don't quite get that. And then the next week, because I knew he expected me to say something like that, like I repeated the same sentence back, like, I just want to accept Jesus as my Lord and Savior. And I kind of convinced myself to believe it as well. Like I wasn't doing it to be deceitful. Like I'm aware that I wanted the expectation, but I also kind of, I'd rationalized it to myself as being true as well. Like, well, God obviously prompted him to say that, to prompt me to want to say this. So as I like, it was really weird. And then I guess yeah, at that point I was like, yeah, so I'm a Christian now. And then like the same in, like taking communion in church and stuff. And I remember the same like guilt thing being laid on before you take communion.
So you at that point placed your faith in Christ through your conversations with that person in ministry?
Yeah, I mean, I think I could say I'd done it in private before then, because I was definitely like praying to God and saying like, like, I know you're real, I want to be a Christian and stuff like that before then. But in that like evangelical sense of like a saying, like I'm a guilty sinner and I need Jesus as my Lord and Savior. That I didn't actually have that. Funnily enough, I didn't get that language from the Bible. I only got it from evangelicals kind of prying me to say those sentences because that was what they expected of a conversion. So yeah.
But internally, your own version of it, you felt like that was actually happening. That was real. You were really believing.
Yeah.
When you announced,
definitely 100%. Yeah.
When you announced it, were they like, yes, at last, you finally got the truth. It finally made sense to you. Or were they kind of celebrating with you, or?
I think. I mean, like England's a funny demographic for the church because you've got a lot of people where historically the Church of England's been quite big. A lot of the people in the Church of England are much older, and there's not many young people. And the young people that are there are almost too young to make decisions for themselves, so they're in families where they get brought along, etc.
Right.
And I feel like maybe they were like they saw this as like a sign that God was still working in. A dark, used to always pray like a dark bit, like God be a light in a dark and sinful generation or something. And it was like, and my generation with phones and social media and porn and whatever is a dark and sinful generation. And so people like me coming to faith in that church was like this sign of God, that God's still working through them. He hasn't, and also that, Christianity is true. The message is true. Look, everything is said about our need for a God, how, like me struggling with depression and stuff, how bad we feel without God. It's all true. And it's been confirmed through what this young man's doing, coming to God. And I think that's the way they saw it. It wasn't kind of like a big celebrate, woo, like have a party. It was more, I mean, there was some weird things people said as well in like one-to-one settings where like someone said something to me where I felt like they wanted me to be Jesus or something. Like they were like it was almost like similar to when I kind of talked about my past and my life and stuff, and I said about becoming a Christian earlier. They kind of went like, you might begin to think that maybe you are Jesus or something with that. But it felt like they were like asking me to like be. It was really bizarre. There was all sorts. But yeah, like with differing responses, and I felt like people more than anything were just happy for it to confirm what they wanted to be true about Christianity. But it wasn't like a big celebration or something.
Now, before you start to talk about, I want to get to the deconversion part because we focused a lot on kind of everything up to that. But before, just as you were in your kind of final discussions before you placed your faith in Christ, and once you were, settled as a Christian, was there much discussion either that they voluntarily offered or that you asked for or pursued that had to do with just the idea of the historical nature, like in the sense of, just giving you some examples, if you were to say, where did this come from? Why is, what's canonicity? Why are there this many books? Why is it 66 and not 70? Why is it not 100? Why did some disciples supposedly write, but others didn't? And did they really write, or was it someone else that just, who wrote these books because they look anonymous? What are the church councils about? Why are the church councils deciding stuff? Where did the name of Yahweh come from? Just all this, you could end up, could make couple hundred questions about origins and stuff. But did any of that come into the equation? Like, look, if you're questioning Jesus at all, let's at least establish the historical nature. This is real. God was really moving in history, and we can show you clearly. You can question all you want, and kind of like Spurgeon would say, the Bible's like a lion, just let it out and it'll do it. You don't need to defend a lion, just let him loose and he'll do his thing. Just if you want to talk about the facts of Christianity, we'll put it on the table for you, and it will just absolutely defend itself. Was there any sense of that, or conversely, was there any sense of avoiding that? Like, let's just talk about, you need to place your faith in Christ. You need to repent and surrender your life to Jesus. And let's not talk too specifically about where this whole thing came from. Like, was there any sense of either dynamic, either side of that?
Yeah. So there was some talk of like historicity and stuff.
Okay.
This was definitely heavily biased, not fair-handed, if that's the right turn of phrase that I'm looking for.
Like resurrection kind of stuff, or
no, more kind of like so in that Christianity Explored course, for example, it would be like, oh, we've got this many thousand Gospels of Mark, right? From within 100 years,
Josh
within
McDowell kind of stuff.
Years.
Yeah,
we've got this many thousand Gospels of Mark. Now, here's comparatively how many as like of other contemporary, other other kind of documents from around the same time that we've got, and it's far less. And so they're not explicit. It's not like a deductive argument or anything, but they're just hoping you'll kind of infer from that it's like more truer. Because there's more documents. They're not like exposing you to the historical method or like how to do ancient history or something, but little things like that were dropped in, or like prophecies. So in the Gospel of Mark, Jesus walks on the water, right? So then maybe they'll briefly introduce you to the idea that the books in the Bible are different things written over a few hundreds of years. And so then they'll go back to like, I forget whether it was a Psalm or Isaiah, something in the Old Testament, which prophesies Jesus walking on the water and calming a storm, or and they'll go, so as you can see, like, isn't this crazy? Like, this actually happened. Now, like, it wasn't even a question in my mind as to whether the author at the time of Mark would have had access to the Old Testament and possibly be interpreting these things theologically into the idea of this Messiah figure that he thought he'd been around or whatever. It wasn't a question of, well, that completely makes sense and he would have had access to that. It was written before, so why couldn't he have done that? Literally, it was just like, oh, wow, that like this is new information. And this guy did all this old stuff. And
yeah, it's so amazing.
yeah.
It is. It's and the Josh McDowell stuff, the manuscripts. It is, once you find out the real picture behind all that, they kind of try to attack you with, look at how many manuscripts of this or that. When you actually look at what's really going on there, I mean, when you have someone that knows their stuff, that really knows it, you're like, wow, you guys twisted that story and those facts so bad. You did not tell us 1/100th of what was really going on there. And I mean, you listen to, especially someone like, I know David Fitzgerald deals with some of that. Have you seen any of David Fitzgerald?
I don't know if David Fitzgerald, no.
Okay.
I know. I'm assuming from some of the stuff you said that you lean more towards like mythicism and stuff. And I'm assuming, I like listening to Richard Carrier.
David Fitzgerald would fall very similarly to Richard Carrier, I think, for a lot of his stuff. But yeah, just you look at the manuscript evidence. It's just they're telling you a very small piece of the puzzle, and they're heavily biasing the way they interpret what scant evidence is there. But anyway, it's funny that you went through the same thing.
Yeah, it's interesting actually, because then learning philosophy to try and confirm Christianity is actually something that has almost led me out of it, because I began, actually to scrutinize claims and apply critical thinking and stuff, and you just begin to think, like, the way in which I accepted certain claims was so irrational. And I know this isn't me saying like I'm so much better now, like I'm still, but I think I'm just aware of my biases more and aware of the way that my brain wants to make kind of causal connections, work in a narrative and stuff. And that isn't indicative of what's actually going on in reality or the facts. And yeah.
Did you ever have the feeling of like, is this the best we've got? like, I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but just like I guess you could interpret it this way, but isn't there something a little bit better than this? Like if this is the God of the universe who controlled everything, he controlled what book he wanted. I mean, he just, says Jesus did more than all the books of the world could contain. He did so much, and like with all the contradictions, all the issues, like this is the best that we've got. Did it ever come across that way, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think
like that?
One of the things I really struggled with, and I didn't even really have any idea I mean, like I knew Jesus died on a cross or whatever, but I didn't have any idea of the kind of theology where Jesus is like a sacrifice who atones for sins. And like I was aware of the language of atonement and stuff there's like various turns of phrase in English language that have come about through interaction with his Christianity. But I just wasn't aware of the theology of like, it's like I've sinned against God. And so there needs to be like a punishment for that. Like the penal substitution, God's of infinite worth. And so there needs to be like an infinite amount of reparation paid. And only God then can pay that. And he does that by emptying himself into Christ and so forth. But I remember as I was first kind of coming to terms with this, I was just like, it doesn't really, I mean, like, for example, I'd think about like Hinduism and I'd be like that's so interesting and weird and cool. Like this idea of like all these multiple incarnations of gods and this, I mean, it has no bearing on whether it's true or not, but it's just weird and like it's so foreign to, whereas this just seemed, it just seemed like this like really simple story or something. Like I don't know if that's what you're getting at when you say it, but I definitely like had this problem like, oh well, is that, like, and I suppressed it actively, but it was like, well, is that it? Like it's just some guy died. And I remember as well having these like, well, like it seemed really counterintuitive to my morality as well, because I was like, so you're saying that if Hitler just like said, Jesus, I accept you, that's more important than him actually like facing any consequences for what he did. Now, I don't even think an infinite amount of time is, I mean, I think something pretty horrible would be in store for Hitler if that kind of justice worked, but I don't think an infinite amount of eternal conscious torment for sure. Is it though still something pretty horrible, but like maybe even just him coming to understanding of all the ways in which he affected people and having empathy for them individually over like thousands of years or something would be really awful in my view, but an infinite amount of time. And then, but the idea that then this, like someone like him would be okay because they believe it, like there's nothing morally worthy about believing the right thing about someone as compared to like how you live. And then I was like, well, and so someone who just lived an okay life but did like just didn't accept Jesus, and obviously they've still got all this sin with them, but their sins just like they forgot to take their bins out or something, they put the wrong stuff in the recycling bin once, or they cut someone up driving, but they've never really done anything bad, and they have to burn forever. But it seemed backwards. Like it didn't seem like justice. Could
I ask, did you ever, and my answer to this is going to be no, to my shame. It should have been an issue, but I'm just curious for you, was it ever an issue thinking about the bizarreness of the blood stuff? I know that Christians wouldn't appreciate this term, but the idea of what's called blood magic.
Right.
The Egyptians had it. The Jews clearly copied it. Canaanites who became Jews clearly copied it, just like they copied the Egyptian circumcision. But it's like, did it ever seem weird to you to think, why does he need blood? Like,
right.
Like what? Why can't he just say, I forgive you? Like, and especially the weirdness to me, like if you ever look at some of the pictures of like outer space, from the Hubble telescope, or some of the really cool, movies and documentaries that are out there where they kind of show you that, a digitally produced video of what it would look like if you could travel through these, galaxies, and you sit back and you look at some of this stuff, and, the video is just showing you flying through what would take, hundreds of millions of years to go through if you could actually travel through it with our, spaceships. And you just step back and you think, the God of the universe made this, And what he really wants to do next is he wants to go to like one little planet and not talk to everybody. He wants to talk to one little tribe. And what does he say first? I want blood and lots of it. Like, that's weird. Did that weirdness ever strike you?
Yeah, to be honest, the idea of like blood magic, putting it in those terms, like completely over my head. Honestly, like I just couldn't see it.
Same.
I agree now. Like I see it, and I think it's weird. I see it when I see it in there. I'm like, this is clearly like Bronze Age man, like anthropomorphizing and trying to figure out morality, right, in the context that they're in. And then those texts have become sacred and they hang around in culture, and then these later authors are picking it up. And I like that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
But the idea of like an omniscient and all-loving, by what I understand loving to be, deity, like having those same ideas doesn't make any sense. And yeah, like that point was just completely lost on me. Yeah, I couldn't see it.
And I love how some people that have been out of it for a while, they paint those pictures in a way that like once you hear it and paint it in a certain way, you're like, I would have never phrased it that way, but now that I see it, it is. Like for example, people say Christianity is a death cult. Like, no, it's not a death cult. Like, actually, yeah, it is. That's when we went into blood magic. Actually, yeah, you were. We weren't into scapegoating. Oh, yes, you were. And like once you're in it, you don't see it, you don't think about it that way, and you almost feel like not quite offended, but you're like, that's just a misrepresentation. But then when you step back, you're like, no, that's not actually misrepresenting it at all. That's actually what was happening.
Well, I think what happens, right, is because it's a part of the cultural fabric you grow up in, and this includes the language that you use to actually represent the world around you as well, that it gets like a free pass on certain things. So if you were to be exposed to like some weird African tribe that does like bizarre things, like it is fundamentally alien to you, whereas like the concepts that you use in language to describe everything, if they've got like etymological roots in biblical phrases, and the way people think is broadly Christian, it just is somehow closer to home, and it doesn't seem like this just bizarre, far away. I think that's what goes on with me, certainly. Like I've got a bias where Christianity like gets this free pass on certain things, whereas if I really like think about it, if I put like, you know, like a secular religious studies person or something, or an anthropologist who's like looking at human religions, and it's like, oh yeah, I agree, like weird fertility rituals and cults and stuff, and that's like, or like, you know, thinking about the harvest in this pagan way or whatever, and this is all built into Christianity and that, but it just gets a free pass when it's familiar, or
That's a good way to put it, free pass. And it is, it's like everyone's kind of looking at each other saying, come on, you know this is true, you know this is real. And then when you're out of it, you're like, why did I keep nodding my head? Like, no, it's not real. It's just because we all accept it. But we all do it because it's culturally acceptable. And did you ever...
Well, that's the thing as well. Sorry to, but like, genuinely, if you are like, you know, like if you're nodding your head while someone says something, you're more likely to accept what they say is true. Like there's a, you know, like we're not made for like critical reasoning when we just like form beliefs, and
I say as I nod my head.
As you shake your head and frown as you
Did you I don't want to dwell on this topic too much, so I want to get to the last part, the deconversion, but I'm just curious, did you get into much the Old Testament with the morality issues? Was that either part of any discussions you had before or during your time as a Christian, and did it ever become a part of the kind of the cracks in the wall, like not just the bizarreness of the blood magic, but just like, did he really say you could beat your slave until they almost die and you don't get punished? And did he really say you can give people away as property? You know, did he really say to go in and kill everybody but keep the young girls alive? Like, did that stuff become part of your story, or was that an aside?
No, so one of the last books I was looking at in that Bible study group before I kind of exited from Christianity was Numbers. And as we were reading, there's all sorts in there. Obviously, some of the slavery stuff you mentioned, but then from a cognitive dissonance standpoint, like I suppose the idea that this is divinely inspired text, the most important truths for humanity, there's just so much boring crap in that book that just seems completely irrelevant about. I mean, like, I could see how if I was like a Bronze Age tribesman or whatever, like, it'd be really important to me how many of certain animals they have, or display of force, or certain like propaganda or rhetoric. But it just doesn't mean anything to me as a modern person. It's just snoozing off trying to read through this thing. Also, towards the end of Exodus, actually, I remember reading about like the burning of animal entrails being like a pleasing aroma to God, and I was like, this is really barbaric. That's kind of awful. Certainly. What else is in Numbers? Like the talking donkey, that was weird. The quail thing's really messed up because aren't they like they complain about, like, God just keeps giving them quail and they complain about it. And I can't remember if it's that or something else, but there's something really trivial. And it's like, well, so God just swallows them up into the earth. And it's like, well, that's just disproportionately punished. Like, that isn't like good parenting or whatever.
Yeah, another section, they ask for something like that, and he sends snakes to bite them all. Yeah,
but the problem is that what I see in that, right, is I see this is like a foreshadowing of stuff in the New Testament, right? The snakes, like the theme of the snakes attacking Moses. Doesn't Moses lifts up a bronze stake on a staff or whatever? And I think, oh, it's all about Jesus. Wow, Jesus is right there, so therefore it's true. Instead of going, the authors had access to this and they were writing a mimesis based off of what,
And then when you realize it's doubled up, where you're like, a lot of the stories that they use for, and I don't honestly know how to pronounce it. I used to say mimesis, and someone called it mimesis.
Oh, is it? Sorry.
I'm not sure yet. I need to ask. Hopefully, I'll listen to Dennis McDonald and see how he pronounces it. But I was talking to somebody a couple weeks ago who's he focuses on what he calls mimesis, and I was like, oh, I'm mispronouncing it, but I'll find out. But anyway, like when you take that and you add on, not just was how the New Testament did that with the Old Testament, but how the Old Testament, those original stories were in large part either copied from some other religion or story, or some kind of epic, or they were also very astrotheological, where they're based on some kind of star, planet constellation, equinoxes and solstices, and you're like, so it's like a double whammy. Like, it's a mimesis on an Old Testament story that was based on a different story,
right?
And you're like, it's like hyper mythology at that point. Like, what in the world? Anyway, I do want to ask. I know we've gone through a lot of the story, but can you tell us about where it came to the crossroads?
So, yeah, I guess like after that conversation with Doug, it was the scales fell from my eyes and I knew good from evil, and it all started.
You saw light from heaven.
Yeah, it started to just kind of like break apart, and still to this day I'm still there are things in my mind that are just super unhealthy that I struggle to get out of. Like, I view viewing modern culture as like being satanic or something, or the way people want, there's dumb ways people want to live because people want like big TVs and flashy cars and they don't really care about the environment or whatever. But that isn't like because of original sin and spiritual warfare. That's just like people being dumb. But I genuinely still really struggle with that stuff. But the point is that things started to fall away. So I started figuring out like where I'd been perhaps pressured into living a certain way or doing certain things in my life by the kind of group that I was in. I started realizing how unhealthy a lot of their views were, like towards like LGBT people, on politics, even like for the workplace. I was like, oh, I've like alienated all my colleagues by constantly talking about Jesus and not just being like a pleasant guy to work around. And same with like family members and stuff. And I guess so you ask about kind of the crossroads, but it wasn't like a flashpoint or something. It was more like this really long period of, I think the way we think about things is like this network of interconnected beliefs, right? And then like one belief gets in there and it doesn't fit with the network, and it causes that cognitive dissonance. And then maybe like the ones that are connected to that, you start to figure out and replace them, and it kind of cascades through. And that's a quite long process.
Was it like was there ever a point there where it kind of came together and you're like, oh shoot, this isn't real? Or was it just like a gradual?
More gradual, like at least not in like an articulated sense. And the point at which I could like articulate in English language, this isn't real. Like I'd probably been in that state subconsciously or whatever for like 2 or 3 months beforehand.
Would you say it was less painful then compared to, I mean, people like myself? I was stuck in it for 43 years, and it was like, I described it as like, when you're in the Matrix movie where Neo first learns jujitsu, where they stick the metal in his head, and he gets like 10 seconds of it, and all of a sudden he knows it, and he opens his eyes, and they're like, oh wow, are you okay or whatever? Do you want some more? And he's like, hell yeah! But like it's so much so fast, and that's kind of me, where it's like you open the floodgates of knowledge and of awareness of like you're self-aware. Like, what did I do to myself? It sounds like that wasn't really as hyper just impactful. Like it sounds like you were able to kind of deal with it step by step in a way that, I mean, maybe it's healthier that way, to deal with it without dealing with it all at once. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, like definitely, like I'm really lucky, for example, that I didn't have like parents who were in that with me, where they might like disown me or hate me, or you hear these kind of stories of people who grow up in it where it is like that. And I was really lucky. Also, conversely, lucky that I didn't have like children who I'd raised that way or something, and maybe thinking, there might be like guilt or regret, or so, equally lucky that, I mean, like I say, I had bought a house with someone at the time, right? And they are still a Christian now to this day. They think I'm under the power of Satan and hate me and all sorts. But I can imagine.
Go back to what you just said. So they thought you were a Christian, and you left. Yeah. And now they hate you.
Right. Yeah.
Isn't that ironic? I don't want to dwell on that. I just want to highlight that. That's so ironic. And I would say ditto. I've experienced a lot of that. But anyway, continue.
but like, like I can only imagine, I managed to, for example, like I sold my bit of the house for about half of what it was worth, pretty pain-free. But if there'd been kids involved, if that, that could have been such a mess. The other thing is living in salary. Like if I'd been in the ministry, for example, if I'd been a public apologist, like my income, my wealth, like I spoke to John Steingard the other day. If I'd had all these people looking up to me for what I believe, that could have been so difficult. And I even think I think if I became a Christian now, a lot of my atheist subscribers, say on YouTube, would think I'm an idiot, but they wouldn't think I'm going to hell, and they wouldn't be I wouldn't have. I would have joined the other team, but the other team wouldn't be this, literally Satan, the most evil thing that could. And that's the way it's viewed, and I'm almost lucky, even though it was pretty crazy and there was a lot of harm in that. I got out lightly. It could have been so much worse. Yeah.
Yeah, I understand. I did some damage when I was in it, but I was very, very grateful that I didn't do more damage than I did. I had to go back and apologize to some people for being a part of it.
Right.
And I was fortunate the people I spoke with so far, they were all very gracious and
right.
Saying, yeah, we get it, and no harm, no foul. But it was I definitely felt that burden of wow, what if I'd been a pastor? This would have been really bad. Right. But yeah. So was PineCreek part of the final crossroads for you? Did he kind of
definitely after that week after talking to him, I did feel kind of physically sick for a week, and this wasn't, like I say, it wasn't this articulate, I wasn't thinking in my mind Christianity is false. Okay. I was just sort of, it was kind of a deer caught in headlights moment, you know, like I was just listening to all these PineCreek videos, and I was like, you know, like I was processing feeling that I'd got it wrong. And then, like I say, I'd be like, and then that actually gave me the tools to look at some of these relationships with people in the church where it was like, frankly, really abusive. And I just couldn't like, I couldn't see that or say it or whatever. And then I'd feel comfortable enough to be like, no, the way this person is behaving towards me is toxic and abusive, and that is not okay to treat another human like that. And then I felt confident enough to like remove myself from that as well, and to, so, but yeah, it was just like, yeah, it you know, like then there'd be like a week where I'd be like, maybe I've got it wrong. Okay, maybe I was just in the wrong type of Christianity. I'm going to go back to the Bible. And then like, I'd be like, no, I'm going to be this type of Christian now. And then like all the problems would start showing for that. Like, but it, you know, like the process would just keep happening like really, really, really quick. To where over a series of months, as more and more of almost those Christian beliefs have peeled away to the point where I just don't think there's good enough reasons for thinking a person rose from the dead. I don't even know if it's like possible, or if it did happen, how it would have happened, or I mean, I don't just rule it out completely, but I just don't see why I should think that. Like medically, I don't understand it. Physically, I don't understand it. Theologically, I don't understand like what a God actually does, or like metaphysically, like does he reconstitute those exact atoms, or is it something else? Where does that come from? What is a miracle? How does that make any sense? And to the point where it's just untenable, really, for me to be like to say that I'm a Christian. But yeah, like. That bleeds out into all sorts of things, though, because it's like freed me up politically to not be like, when people are left wing, they are therefore assaulting the order of God that's been instituted in Western civilization or something. Like I'm actually able to go, maybe welfare's all right in some circumstances. Are there good arguments for it? What should I think about that? Like, or you know, like what? So my brother, who's also adopted, he's gay, and it's like, oh, how have I like mistreated him over the past few years because of this? Or is there actually any problem if he's in like a healthy relationship? They're both good for each other. They both help each other out. They it makes their lives better. They flourish more. Like, why would I be opposed to that? There's no good reasons. And then also, can we like be better friends now? But that, like I said before, it's just this it's gradual. Like it doesn't just happen. And I'm still in that now. I'm still like in that process of, you know, like I'll be at work and someone will come and say, oh, well, you're a Christian, of course. So you think and I'll be like, oh no, I must have said something crazy to them. Like they don't know, like I'm so far from that now. Do you struggle, or did you ever struggle with the idea of hell? I know you mentioned carrots and sticks. Did you struggle at all thinking, or did anyone else kind of threaten you with like, look, if you don't come back, you know, you're headed down to a very, very sad future. Did that come up at all, or did you bring it up in your own mind? I struggle with the idea in principle that I might either be deceived by Satan, and I've now betrayed Jesus and planted my flag on the side of Satan's lies and will be going to hell. Now, I don't think I've got good enough reasons for thinking a place called hell exists. You know, like there's all these rational arguments against it. Like where is it in the Old Testament? Or even if I were a Christian, you know, what does someone like David Bentley Hart have to say about, or what do like Christian Platonists who believe God is, you know, goodness itself have to say about the idea of an eternal punishment? But like rationally, there's I don't think there are good reasons to believe in it, but it's just so frightening at an emotional level. And that spiritual warfare thing it's somehow that, like, that's one of those things that got a hook in my brain somehow. And it, you know, I'm just crazy in the right way that I can't get rid of it. And I certainly struggle with that. Even like, you know, it doesn't help like, like I was in a live stream where I was talking to like Aaron Ra the other day, right? And he
saw that. That was good.
But like he presents like he's like he's got this beard and he just looks and all my biases then kick in, and I think, so when he's an aggressive atheist, this is spiritual warfare. And like no, that's crazy, Nathan. Like for those watching, I'm not, like I'm aware how silly that sounds, but it's like this bias or whatever it is. And yeah, part of that kind of is how, like, I don't really think such a place exists, but it's just so terrifying that like it can motivate like a certain part of my reasoning or something. Like, it's to think of like just this horrible place and there's no escape and there's no like, and it's like, that's just so scary that it just makes like a primal part of my thoughts like freak out and be like, get away from that, get it, like anything, like, yeah.
Yeah, no, he definitely has that intimidating appearance. I think he's a big teddy bear. Right. Certainly, like any bear would, defend its children viciously, and he can certainly, hold his own. But he's got a heart of gold. I can tell. It's. Oh
yeah, I'm just saying it's like it's 100% like my bias. Like yeah. I used to think. Like if a woman chooses to dye her hair like blue or pink or something, then I was like, oh, she's adopted the Jezebel spirit, and they say, like now like that. I'm friends with so many people who have dyed hair, and they're just normal people who, for whatever reason, have chose to dye their hair. Like,
yeah, I have the same background. It's amazing what we do to our minds with that stuff.
Yeah.
So where at this point, just to kind of finish out the story, where are you with things? Are you on the fence in any way? And a couple questions. I'll ask a couple. Okay. You can answer them in the order you want. A couple questions would be, are you on the fence at all? Number two might be, like, if you're looking at your channel, looking at your conversations with friends, like, where do you want to take your platform at this point? I don't just mean your YouTube platform, just your voice. Right. Where do you want to take it at this point? And then I this is out of order, but going backwards, I meant to ask, with the your discovery of things like mimesis and other things about how the Bible was written, did you look into pagan parallels at all? Was that a part of your deconversion process? So pagan parallels maybe first, but then, like, where are you now? What's your platform going to look like?
Right. So yeah, in terms of like being, I'm on the fence about like a bunch of things. Like I guess I mentioned earlier, like I don't know, like in the philosophical sense of like the term no, to like really be anchored to truth that a God does or doesn't exist. Like I just do not know. Like, and it seems to me, like, given everything that I do think is true about the world, that it's still in principle, there's nothing contradictory about some kind of deity existing or being the cause of things in some way or and I don't know that isn't the case. Like, I might believe, I might think there's no reason to posit that as an explanation. Like, there's nothing really that I'm aware of in the world that requires that explanation and can't be explained by something else. But it also could be the case that, like, how much do I know? Like, it could be the case that thing is out there and I'm just not aware of it, or that argument, or it could be the case that maybe even though it was less intuitive to me or whatever, that actually is the way things work. Like, even though from the standpoint of neuroscience and my understanding of philosophy, there's no reason to like posit a soul, say, and the brain and the psychology can explain everything that we need it to. Still, it actually is the case there's a soul there, and I just didn't possess the tools to. It's just that those things are like less simple explanations than, and I don't understand how I'd get to any of those explanations without like opening up the floodgates to like like invisible elves who are also like manipulating my neurons, or the flying teapot of Bertrand Russell. They're just not. Neither kind of here nor there in terms of explanations. They don't add anything, but they could be true, and I just don't have the ability to get there rationally.
Right. On that note, could I ask you on that note, do you have any differentiation that you make in your mind between now, at this point, from where you're standing, to say there's certainly as a, in an agnostic sense, there could be something out there. Sure, I mean, you can't deny that there could be something out there. But do you differentiate between saying, if there's something, it doesn't look like the gods that we're talking about. It doesn't look like a God who likes blood and a God who wants you to circumcise your boys. It's like, that's, if there is a God, it's something utterly different. And maybe God isn't even the right word to term for it. There's some kind of other reality that could be out there that maybe someday, some future generation will discover there's more to this. But just in the sense of, if there were a deity like Yahweh or Allah or whatever, and now that we know, the reality that they're not existing, then you're left with this conundrum of, then if there is a God, whatever that God is, it hasn't spoken to us. Why would there be a God who's created and then doesn't say anything ever to anybody under any circumstances? Like, at that point, you have to say, if there is a God, it's not like the God we're thinking of, where he's like, I want to be in a personal relationship with you. I want to come into your heart and, give you peace. It's like, if there is some kind of deity, do you pronounce it deity or deity?
I say deity, but
okay.
I'm not bothered either way.
Okay. I'll have to figure out if I'm mispronouncing that too. But, if you're looking at this and saying, there's clearly nothing real about Yahweh. There's clearly nothing real about Allah, or whatever, Vishnu, Ganesh, Thor, Zeus. They're not real. They're mythology. Mm-hmm. So you're left with, okay, if there is a God, he hasn't spoken. She, it is whatever. It's not talking to anybody, which means that I have no idea how to even begin to think or describe it in my mind, because it hasn't revealed itself in a way that's similar to what I was thinking of or expecting as a God that writes a book or gives you visions or talks to you in your prayers. It's something completely different. And then how, I know that this is not original with me, but like, how would you know the difference between that and just a really advanced being? Like, what if there was a civilization on the other side of the universe that was millions upon millions, maybe billions of years more advanced than us in technology, where they had computers a billion years ago, and they've just made them better and better, and they know how to do light speed spaceships. And if you could get to that point where they could just take their technology and exponentially increase it to the point that anything that we would think of as magic, they could do, and it wouldn't be magic, it'd just be very advanced math and science. Like, how would you differentiate between, if say, a million years from now, we finally discover some being that looks like, whoa, that's beyond our wildest dreams. It's just an advanced civilization. Like, do you think about those, and how do you relate to that? Because it seems like, I feel like the need is to say, at least at the very bare minimum, if there is anything out there, it's not like what we've been talking about. It's something completely different.
So, I mean, I completely agree that those are very difficult questions to answer. Like, how could I tell the difference? And I almost concede that to some degree, I probably couldn't. I mean, like I could say, ask such a being to take me through the reasoning. I could, and even so, it could be deceiving me. And because I'm not the one in the position to be able to tell whether or not it's deceiving, I'd just be deceived.
That's a good point.
I don't know. I mean, and I do find it interesting. Like, there's a lot of kind of stuff built into that question. Like, I like listening to people like Terence McKenna, who was this kind of popularizer in psychedelic culture, and he talks a lot about his psychedelic experiences. And for example, he sort of has this idea that when you take something like mushrooms and you get to a deep level of the trip, you're experiencing, and I'm not endorsing this view before people think I'm kind of some irrational, but what he says is you see these other beings who are like machine elves that are chanting reality into existence or something, and they're like alien beings almost. And it's like, well, what's the difference between that or like a god, a religious conception, we then begin at our start point of things we think we're certain of, and we try to provide just so stories where that thing fits in the explanation somehow. I guess something I think about is because I'm a fallibilist, right, about my own knowledge, but then furthermore about like the language I have to, like the access I have to reality. So I'm constrained by my own mind. I can't take off my mind and absolutely access this pen falling to the floor and the light and the laws of physics. I have to use my perceptions, and then as I communicate that, I have to use language, and I'm limited by that. And I suppose it's possible that there are some kind of facts about the world that pertain to some kind of deities or gods or religions or even alien beings that might have created, like a simulation that we're in and are running on a computer or something that we're aware of in some way or have access to. And then various people have tried to describe that in certain ways, constrained by their languages and cultures and times. That is possible, but again, that's not a scientific hypothesis I've put out there. That could again be me just trying to account for all the things I'm aware of, and then I could give you a just so story about how it is the case, but it doesn't help explain anything new. It doesn't make any testable predictions. It's not, it could just be it could actually be that Hinduism's true and you do the same thing for that. And I have this problem of how do I tell the difference? To give one really kind of personal example, like a few weeks ago, I took psychedelic mushrooms, right? And not in this Terence McKenna sense of seeing machine elves, but I certainly had almost like a Buddhist type experience where I was kind of thinking about myself and how it is that matter can have like a personal conscious aspect to it, what's sometimes called kind of like the hard problem of consciousness in philosophy. Mm. And what it felt to me like, and again, this is not me saying that it's true, but and therapeutically for some of the issues I struggle with depression, this experience was quite beneficial. But what it felt to me like was that there was almost only one self, and that self was everything. And like, here's the problem though. So I have that experience from a first person perspective, which felt true and veridical. But then I also have an explanation from science, right? Which says that, well, what happens in that experience is that there's a region in the brain that's responsible for ego and perception of self, and it defines boundaries between perceptions and models the reality that you're engaging with, and that region is down-regulated during the experience. So and that would explain why a subject would begin to kind of almost, maybe the right terminology is, confuse themselves for the reality around them, right? And that explanation also makes sense of it, as well as the first. And it's like, obviously, I think the science is true on this, but then the first person experience has been so beneficial to me with my depression and with my, like, I also can't throw that thing away. And I'm kind of rambling and I've gone way off of what your original question was, but what I'm saying is, like, I kind of view religion, whatever it is kind of here to stay. It's a feature of humanity. And the important question is perhaps like, why does it exist, or how do you coexist with it? Well, like, okay, I've got this knowledge that there's all these plot holes in Christianity, and like Yahweh doesn't exist in that way to me or whatever, but like, why are people believing it? And if the answer is like, well, because they really hate gay people, or they become tribal, it's attached to their politics, well, that's like harmful, right? But if the answer is like, there are things in life that are really tough and this is helping them to like live in an oppressive society, whatever, then maybe I should like leave that alone, and I understand it. And I'm wrestling with all these things all the time. Like, I don't know. Again, like, I could be wrong about it, right? I'm not prepared to die for what I believe or something, like as if I've got the truth and everyone else. Like, I could be wrong, and I'll become a Christian again in the future. But yeah, the best way. I'm definitely not answering any question you gave. But the best way I've got going forward is just to like try and use the best reasoning that I can to form true beliefs for myself. Try and reason about morality to figure out the best way of acting, and that's all I can do. Like I can't solve these like ultimate problems of why is there consciousness and what is religion? Is it tethered to God or not? And I'm just in this position of being and existing like that, and enjoying the journey kind of in the process and the conversations and stuff.
With all those kind of philosophical questions and just even your own journey, depression, all the other parts of your story, do you feel healthier, more healthy, less healthy, equally healthy as when you were a Christian, just in the sense of thriving?
Right.
Or peace?
I think more healthy now. I guess I've got a more realistic attitude towards the life that I'm living. Like rather than viewing the life as I'm living as something to be endured so I can die and go to heaven, I now understand the role and the parts that specific sort of elements of my life play in it. So like if I go to like jiu-jitsu, I can have like authentic conversations with people, and that can like break me out of a particularly rigid way of thinking. And then maybe I'll do like stretching after, and I'm like, oh, exercise is done now. Now I'm going to go and like focus on learning some maths or something. And now I'm going to go to work, and I'm going to try and like do this today. And I feel like I'm more in my life. Whereas in Christianity, I was just like waiting for it to be over, having a really horrible time, and always like praying like, God, why is it like this? I hate it. I just want to die. And yeah, I guess as well, being able to think about the issues that I face without having to have like a theological explanation for them, just provides me more. This isn't to say it's like perfect now, but just from a well-being perspective, it's certainly better, because I can like I can deal with like issues of human sexuality and think about them honestly, without it being like without the issue being that I drive to work, and like if I glance at a woman, I'm like beating myself up all day because Jesus says, you've looked with lust, and so you've committed adultery in your heart. And I can honestly deal with like that aspect of my life. Or I can honestly deal with, like having career goals without being like, oh, because I want to have enough money to be comfortable, I'm not glorifying Jesus and I'm evil. And I like, just from a well-being perspective, I think it's much better. Like there's an element of community that's different, but I also think that the community within churches, a lot of it can be superficial. And because you're putting on this sanitized church accepted persona, sometimes I mean, maybe your experience is different, but maybe you don't get to like the real investment in people's true selves. And I can kind of find that through like the community at jiu-jitsu, or through forming authentic relationships at work and stuff like that. So
you mentioned earlier the whole idea of sin and that you're a sinner, you've displeased God. Did you have to was there any kind of healing process from that, and just saying, yes, clearly we can all make bad choices, yes, we all need to be getting wise counsel and blah blah blah, but did you have to go through any kind of healing from the trauma of just saying, I thought of myself for whatever period of time as truly wretched, as truly broken, as truly depraved? You mentioned the thing with with lust, just like I am bad. Was that easy to get over, or did you struggle with that at all?
It's very difficult, and I do still like struggle with it. But I think this realization that and continually dwelling on the fact that people aren't ever almost exclusively one or the other, and there's all this complexity mixed in there. So even when I think of people who do terrible things, like, to what degree are they a product of their environment, right? To what degree is it them that's doing that? Or to what degree is it that they were raised in poverty, didn't receive the right education in a country where there aren't economic opportunities for them to have jobs, and so they turn to this or that? Like, And does that make them bad? That I mean, like what they did is bad, and they're responsible for their actions. But that doesn't really, they need to be rehabilitated, not burnt in hell forever. And then, I guess another one is like, so like in the UK at the moment, for example, MPs that just voted against funding for like free school meals in like free school meal tickets. And it's been this whole like political thing. There's been a footballer who was kind of involved in campaigning for it because he was on them when he was younger. But then you see in reaction to this, as well as all the typical politics, the people on the other team are evil, scum, no, you're evil, scum, you just want handouts, whatever. You also see organically people with businesses and things saying, okay, so for people in this area, I own a restaurant, I'm going to give free food or whatever. And as I look through the like responses from all of these people, like, okay, they're not perfect, this person, they drive a Range Rover or whatever, and that pollutes the environment. Maybe it's inconsiderate in certain ways. Maybe they take their kids to school in it, and that's causing traffic when I want to get to work, and they could make their kids walk. But they're not. It's not just clear cut like they're evil or good. Like, they really, for whatever reason, a lot of people are just trying their best. Like, they're trying to deal with. They have this sense of right and wrong. They have this sense of like, it's wrong for these kids to starve, and I'm going to do what I can. And that overrides their desire for profit or personal comfort in their own business. But then they're also just trying to survive. Like it's been a rainy, cold day here in the UK, and I'm sure like they also keep their heating on just because they're cold or whatever. Like, and it doesn't make them bad that they like do that. Or that they, and people are just these complex mixtures of, and the Christian narrative of like. The one that got embedded in me certainly of you're just evil, and anything good that you do is creditable to God, and it just doesn't reflect the reality on the ground, which is that most people are trying their best. Life is really tough, and we've got to figure out a way to deal with those base needs. So then we can like reason about other things, and then maybe make like life better, make it less harsh, less suffering. Yeah,
it's a good perspective. I completely agree, and it's one of the best parts about deconversion is, to me, kind of like when Neo in the Matrix, to go back to it, he says, why do my eyes hurt? And Morpheus says, you've never used them before. It's like you finally get to use your eyes, your emotional, philosophical, mental eyes for the first time, and you get to truly look at other humans healthily and say, other humans are going through struggles, they're going through difficulties, and you take away all this craziness of, whether or not they've submitted to God and blood magic enough. And it's like, you just look at them for real for the first time. And it's a very radical change. I know we've gone pretty long here. I did want to wrap up, and I wanted to ask you to ask, if I could, just to have the last note on, if someone was listening and let's say that some of the stuff you've talked about has kind of hit some of the nerves where they're at. They're saying maybe, I'm a Christian, but some stuff isn't adding up. I'm starting to study stuff, but I don't really know too much. It's more like I know enough to be dangerous, so I know I need to just kind of buckle down and learn a lot more. But they're starting to ask some good questions. And they're maybe even a little bit fearful of where those questions lead. How would you advise them to both have the peace of the journey, the healthiness of just being like, look, you don't have to figure this out in a day, take your time, but how to move forward with that journey and say, let's think through this carefully. Like, what would you say would be a good starting point for that? And we'll have this be the last question.
Yeah, I think so the first thing maybe I would say is like, you have to realize that you don't have to deconvert, right? Just because you've got these doubts, or you think like you may stay a Christian at the end process of this, and it doesn't guarantee that you deconvert. And I personally, I'm not really that bothered either way, unless I think that the way that your beliefs are like really harming people immediately around you, and even if that's the degree to some small amount, like. I mean really harming. Then I'd be like, well, that's got to be dealt with. So you can stop that. But it doesn't mean you don't. Like you might stay a Christian, and so just take some time to breathe, right? take some time to just step back and breathe and just reflect on things. I mean, if you have to remove yourself from, like, say, church for a couple of weeks to think about things and then come back with like a fresh set of eyes and look at it, then there's no harm in that. And maybe you'll come back and like you'll find a new type of Christianity or something, and that's an okay outcome. It might be like better or healthier for you, or it might make you a better Christian. And you don't have to like make these instant decisions. Like I say, like I don't believe in Jesus right now. I might become a Christian in future, and this whole process is just a part of that, and making me a better person and understanding God. And
what can I add to that? If you ever go down that path, please call me first. We'll talk.
Yeah, I guess it's just as if you're really if your concern is more about the truths, like, is this thing that I believe true or not? Obviously, I have opinions about that, and so that's influencing my answer. But I think what you have to do is really try and like pull those beliefs out of you and put them on a shelf and just look at them. And that goes for like atheism as well. If you know, like anything that you might think, you have to just not be you, and you have to be like, how would I like look at this through a microscope and dissect these individual parts, and then maybe you come to a more integrated understanding of it, and you can put back in those bits that make sense or work. Or that's my
good answer. Do you have any resources that you found particularly helpful as you thought through it that you'd recommend, or people to listen to? Or
I mean, like Doug PineCreek, who you've mentioned, I really enjoyed listening to him. But I guess he can also be kind of satirical, and that might not be the right thing for some people who are deconverting.
Yeah, they just want a serious discussion.
Yeah, and even there are organizations like freedomfromreligion.org or whatever. And people who, but I sometimes find, because they're so linked into like atheist communities and stuff, if you're seeing things through this like lens of us and them, like you'll see that as like a them team thing that's been set up to deconvert people. Maybe for some people, like maybe you're just thinking, what do you want about Nathan? You're crazy. I'm going to go and talk to them, and it's useful. But certainly I was like, you know, they're like tweeting with all these atheist groups and stuff. So they're obviously evil, and I don't want to talk to them. So I guess one thing I'd really recommend is to read up on like the psychology of human like biases and belief formation. So there's a book by a guy called Daniel Kahneman, another one of those words that I don't know how to pronounce, but it's called Thinking Fast and Slow. And that basically goes through a lot about human biases. And there's also a book called How We Know What Isn't. And I think that those could be really useful tools in just realizing that, because it's not about Christianity, it's not about religion. And you can apply it to your own life and what you think in whatever way, but just seeing the ways in which human brains think about things and form beliefs. And then another channel called Theremin Trees on YouTube, which is by a guy who I think he's a counselor, and he's got some quite good therapeutic ideas, especially, again, you might stay a Christian, but it might help you to identify like abuse if that's the kind of thing that's leading you to, and then you can have a healthier like human relationship and stay a Christian, but that might help out in that regard. Yeah,
his channel is fantastic. I honestly have a couple that I go back to every 2 or 3 months just because they're so foundational. He's so good at what he does. Yeah, they just, you feel healthy when you watch some of the videos on Theremin Trees. When you're done, you're like, I just feel healthy now. I feel like the wisest grandfatherly man who just has made a million wise choices just talked me through my life. And so, yeah, you walk away thinking I can thrive a little bit better now. So yeah, good stuff. I appreciate the books too. I never heard of this book, so I'll look them up.
Yeah, and there's an interview there's a guy called Lex Friedman who's got a pretty cool podcast, and he's just recently done an interview with Daniel Kahneman as well. So that's if you don't like reading, that might be a good listen.
Cool. Yeah, I'll try to look up some of these and put them in the notes. So hopefully at least some or all of them can be just clicked on if people want to look further. So, again, we're talking today with Nathan Ormond. His YouTube channel again is Digital Gnosis. And this has been awesome. It's been awesome to hear your story. And I'd love to stay in touch from time to time. Just kind of, I'll be watching your videos, but I'd love to stay in touch every few months and just kind of hear how things are going and growing. And I know from what I've seen, a lot of people appreciate your voice in all these discussions. So I appreciate what you're doing, and I hope your platform increases, and that just that you can really continue to be a blessing to a lot of people. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, man. I've really enjoyed the conversation. You're a good interviewer as well. So yeah,
thank you.
Like you've done your background research and stuff on me as well at the start.
Yeah, it's amazing how different interviews go when you've done some research versus when you kind of wing it. It's
right.
Night and day. So, yeah. Well, thank you again. I know it's getting late there, but I appreciate you staying up for this, and I really appreciate your time, and we'll do it again soon.
Great. Thanks, man. Yeah.
Thanks, Nathan.